Richard I of England, known as Richard the Lionheart, is a central figure in medieval history and popular culture. He was crowned king on September 3, 1189, and although his reign lasted less than 10 years, his reputation as a courageous warrior and a leader in the Crusades made him a legend. But who really was this king, whose image has been so romanticized over the centuries? Richard was born on the 8th of September, 1157, probably at a royal palace in Oxford. He was the third son of King Henry II and Eleanor of Aquitaine, one of the most influential women of her time. His lineage connected him to several European royal houses, and he was raised between England and France. Although born English, Richard spent much of his life at the French court, which explains why he spoke little English, writing mainly in French and Occitan, a language spoken in southern France. Although he was the son of an English king, most of Richard's estates were in France, reflecting the complex relationships between noble families at the time. Richard's mother, Eleanor, was heiress to vast lands in southern France, and her political influence was tremendous. Richard was considered his mother's favorite, which profoundly shaped his future. Next, we will see how Richard entered into an intricate family power game, which involved revolts, betrayals, and dynastic wars. Richard's rise to the throne of England was marked by a series of family conflicts. His father, Henry II, faced several revolts within his own family. Richard, along with his brothers, fought for control of territories and influence, generating one of the greatest dynastic crises of the period. Henry I, Richard's grandfather, died without leaving male heirs, which began a war of succession between his daughter Matilda and her cousin Stephen, both claiming the English throne. This conflict became known as the Anarchy and ended with the accession of Richard's father, Henry II, to the throne, founding the Plantagenet dynasty. This dynasty would rule vast territories that included parts of France and England. The relationship between Henry II and his sons was strained. The desire to divide power between them and secure the succession led to a revolt in 1173, when Henry's sons rebelled against him. Richard, then 15, joined his brothers Henry the Younger and Geoffrey in this rebellion, which was supported by the King of France and other powerful nobles. Henry's sons wanted more land and power, but were defeated by their father, who employed a large army of mercenaries. Ricardo surrendered, but the rivalry with his father and brothers was far from over. Next, we'll see how Richard consolidated his power and earned the title Lionheart. After the failed revolt against his father, Richard focused on consolidating his power in the territories he ruled. He inherited the Duchy of Aquitaine from his mother, Eleanor, and began to rule this important French region. Although he had been duke since the age of 14, it was only after the rebellion that Richard was able to consolidate his rule over the local nobles, suppressing several revolts that occurred in his domains. It was during these campaigns in Aquitaine that Richard began to earn his reputation as a great warrior and military strategist. He would personally lead his troops into battle, and his courageous leadership style and constant presence on the battlefield earned him the title of the Lionheart. But family intrigues continued. In 1183, his brother Henry the Younger died, making Richard the direct heir to the throne of England. This put him in direct conflict with his father once again, as Richard wanted more autonomy and power over his territories. To balance this dispute, Richard made an alliance with the new King of France, Philip II, to whom he paid homage as a vassal, something that increased tension with Henry's second hook. Now, as heir to the throne and ally of the French king, Richard was preparing for one of the most important moments of his life, his participation in the Crusades. Richard the Lionheart is best remembered for his role in the Crusades, particularly the Third Crusade, which began after the capture of Jerusalem by Sultan Saladin in 1187. The Crusades were military campaigns organized by European Christians to reconquer the Holy Land, and Richard was determined to participate. Even before he was crowned king, Richard had promised to join the crusade. When he finally ascended the throne in 1189, he devoted much of his resources and attention to this endeavor. Richard set out for the Holy Land, accompanied by Philip II of France, his longtime ally, but relations between the two kings were strained. Both feared that the other would plot behind their backs to seize their European territories while they were away, which led to a fragile alliance during the crusade. Richard demonstrated his military prowess once again, winning important battles against Saladin's forces. However, he failed to recapture Jerusalem, the main objective of the crusade. Despite this, Richard signed a treaty with Saladin that allowed Christian pilgrims to visit the city, marking the end of the Third Crusade. Richard's return to England after the Crusades was filled with intrigue and adventure, including a famous kidnapping. After the Third Crusade ended, Richard faced a new challenge, his own kidnapping. While returning to England in 1192, Richard was captured by Duke Leopold V of Austria, a former enemy who held him responsible for an insult during the crusade. Leopold handed Richard over to the Holy Roman Emperor Henry VI, who demanded a large ransom for the English king's release. The kidnapping of Richard the Lionheart has become one of the most famous stories of the Middle Ages. The ransom demanded was immense, and the people of England had to pay heavy taxes to free their king. After a long period of negotiations and the payment of the ransom, Richard was finally released in 1194. This event is also often linked to the legend of Robin Hood, the famous outlaw who, according to popular tradition, fought against Richard's brother, John Lackland, while the king was away on the Crusades and held captive in Europe. Richard's release marked the beginning of the end of his reign, which would be cut short by his untimely death. Richard the Lionheart ruled England for less than 10 years, much of that time spent away from his kingdom, either on the Crusades or as a prisoner in Europe. Yet his reputation as a great warrior king has endured, and he has become a central figure in popular culture. Richard died in 1199, aged 41, after being wounded by an arrow during the siege of a castle in France. His premature death ended a reign marked by war and intrigue, but his legend continued to grow in the following centuries. He has been transformed into a romantic hero, especially in the Robin Hood stories, where he is portrayed as the righteous king who returns to save his people from the clutches of the evil Jack Landless. However, modern historians have a more critical view of Richard. Although he was a skilled military